So hi, my name's Ed, and today we're going to be talking about life after language studies, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think the best reason to tell you what this talk's going to be about is to kind of explain why I wanted to give this talk, okay? So to start off, can anyone tell me, it's quite an easy question, what we all have in common? Everyone in this room? Easy, told you. So basically we all love languages, right? And I take it a step further to say that we all have, if we've traveled to Bratislava to come and geek out and talk about languages, we have a passion for languages, right? And when I was a kid, I realized pretty early on that I had this passion and that I didn't necessarily want to be the richest guy in the world or an astronaut or a footballer or anything like the normal kids in school. I wanted to have a life full of languages. So what does that mean? Not necessarily locking myself in a room with an Arabic dictionary, but in my mind I was like some cool businessman that would like wake up in one language, go to business meetings in another language, speak to my friends in another language, and like that was kind of my dream, right? Does anyone share that weird dream? Anyone? I'm not alone, thank you. So there we go, and I'm now 30 years old. I know I don't look it. Not a day over 20. And I have to say, as I'm not the richest or the most intelligent or anything like that, and I don't know everything, but I have managed to make a life full of languages for myself. So I am actually able to wake up and speak 4 or 5 languages day in, day out. So I eat, sleep, drink, party, and other things I won't mention in this talk in those 4 or 5 languages every day. But it wasn't always the case, and there was a particular period in my life where I didn't really speak any languages at all, and I found it really hard to find a language job, to have a language lifestyle, and essentially have a life full of languages. So I thought it might be interesting to basically tell you about everything that I've done wrong in my life, so that you can maybe not make the same mistakes, and hopefully we can kind of learn something from it and look back and kind of see maybe if it's not interesting for you, but then maybe for people you know that like languages, or maybe your kids as well. Okay? Sound good? Come on, guys. Thank you. That's better. So basically, I said the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm going to go the reverse around to finish on a happy ending. No pun intended. So starting with the ugly, and just before we get into it, can I see a show of hands who has already studied languages at university? Okay. Who is studying languages at university? And who is going to study languages at university? Cool, okay. What was my point here? So basically, there's going to be something in here for everyone. And I think in terms of something that you'll all identify with is the ugliest point, I think, in my life was this moment here. So when I say the ugliest moment in my life, I mean my language life. And you can kind of see that my mum, if you can all see the photo, she's pretty happy with herself, right? But if you kind of look closely at my expression, I kind of have a look, or the feeling that I definitely have was, what the hell am I going to do? Because I basically spent, from the age of 16 to 22, speaking languages. So I liked languages at school. My teacher said, if you like languages at school, study them at university. So that was basically what I did, and my job was essentially to learn languages. It's pretty cool, right? And it was around this sort of time when I was finishing university, I realized that I don't think anyone's going to pay me to carry on doing this. If there is anyone, find me afterwards. But I certainly couldn't find a job where someone would pay me to do it, right? And so I had this really weird feeling. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do in my life? Like, how can I use these languages to like make money and actually make a living for myself? And this feeling got worse the more I spoke with my friends who were getting these cool jobs in like banking and like insurance, and they got to wear a suit every day, which I thought was quite cool at that point. And so in my head, I wanted a life full of languages, right? So I didn't necessarily want to do these things. And I started thinking, okay, so what can I do? How can I like make this like language stuff for myself, right? And at this point, I was pretty lost. So I applied for a master's in interpreting. I worked very shortly as a translator for footballers. And I was also applying for any language job I could find, literally. From stockbroking with German to golf ball picker-upper with French, literally any language job that I could find in the world of languages. And I realized pretty quickly I was bad at interpreting, pretty bad at translation, and that ultimately I did want to do something with languages, but I was going to these interviews and I had this weird feeling after all the interviews. I was like, it didn't really feel right. So I'm going to ask you to guess what I did next, where basically I didn't want to grow up and I wanted to carry on learning languages. Any ideas? I went traveling. There you go. So I went traveling very briefly, and I basically said to myself, I want to learn Spanish as my next language. And I remember I contacted this agency to find me an internship in Spain. And about a week later, the woman contacted me. I think her name was Almudena. And she got back to me and she said, Ed, we've got a cool job for you as an international relations executive. Ooh, sounds pretty cool. And I remember Almudena was explaining about this job. She was saying, yeah, so you're going to do this and this. And the whole time, I didn't really listen to anything she said. All I was thinking was, am I going to get to speak Spanish every day? So I waited till the end of the thing. I said, y Almudena, voy a hablar español todos los días. Am I going to speak Spanish every day? She said, Ed, es una oficina española, vas a hablar español todos los días. You're going to speak Spanish every day. And that was all I really listened to. So I accepted the job and went to Barcelona. And away I went. And on my first day on the job, I very quickly realized that I hadn't listened to what Almudena was telling me. And international relations executive was essentially doing photocopying. And the oficina española was actually una oficina catalana, where everyone was speaking Catalan. It's a good day. So essentially, I remember my first day was awful. I was sitting there, I'd done a lot of photocopying, heard a lot of Catalan, and I was sitting there thinking, I'm going to leave. I'm going to walk out this door. This is awful. This is not what I signed up for. And this girl came over to me, and she started speaking in Spanish to me. And I was very basic Spanish, so I started responding as best as I could, making a lot of errors. And eventually I managed to have a conversation. And I was like, okay, that's kind of the reason why I've come here. And that then gave me the motivation to stay in Spain. And eventually found Spanish flatmates, I found a Spanish hockey team, I found a Spanish group of friends, and after about 4 months in Spain, I could speak Spanish. So I kind of accomplished what I wanted to. Thanks. Obviously that wasn't enough though, so any ideas what I did next? Close. I packed my bag and I decided I wanted to learn Portuguese. So basically, ever since I saw, does anyone know the film The City of God or A Cidade de Deus? Hands up. So for anyone that doesn't know it, it's basically a film about drugs and gangsters. Perfect motivation for learning a language. And in my head, ever since I saw that film, I really wanted to go to Brazil. I thought a really cool place. And that was my dream. That was where I wanted to go to. So I remember I was working in a hostel, this was before, and I met this Brazilian guy, and because I wanted to go to Brazil, I said, hey, Pablo, I'm thinking about going to Brazil, I want to learn Brazilian Portuguese, where can I go, what's the best place to go, like, how can I get a job? And he said to me, cara, like, mate, or dude, você vem para cá, você trabalha na minha casa, você fica na minha casa, você trabalha com a gente e você vai aprender português. Just come to my house, work with us, and you're going to learn Portuguese. So rather than thinking, I don't really know this guy, I don't know his family, I don't know where he lives, I have never worked in a pizzeria, I thought, vou aprender português. And away I went to Brazil. But Pablo sadly didn't live in Rio. He lived in a place called Sorocaba. Has anyone heard of Sorocaba? Why? Oh wow, okay, first person I've ever heard this. Okay. So essentially, Sorocaba is a place about 3 hours from Sao Paulo, and no one goes there because it's not very touristy and there's not much to see. It was, however, the best way I could have thought to learn Portuguese because literally there are no tourists there. And I stayed in this guy's house, worked with him in the pizzeria, and I literally had people coming into the pizzeria because I was un gringo working in the pizzeria in this place. And essentially, so after then 3 months of living in Brazil, I realized I didn't have any money left, and I should probably, get a proper job. And for family reasons I won't go into, I decided to go back home, so that's where I'm from, which is Maidenhead. And I remember very specifically, I was sitting in the kitchen with my mum, and my mum said to me, Ed, I appreciate you want to do stuff with languages, but I think it's time, you need to get a bit of money and you essentially need to get a job. So I said, yes, mum. And I'm a mummy's boy, what can you say? So anyway, and so I remember thinking to myself at this point, so I'd looked all over the world at the random language jobs, and I was trying to think, okay, what might I like? I was thinking, okay, maybe sales, because I like kind of speaking to people, and I kind of like psychology behind that. So I started looking at sales jobs. So I moved to London to live with my friends, and it was a very, very English-speaking environment, so literally only had my English-speaking friends and family around me. And luckily I found a job without really much experience, I have to admit, at a company called Thomsons Online Benefits. Cool company, if ever you're looking for a job. And essentially this job taught me, so I was working in sales, like international sales, and it taught me all about sales, about marketing, about business, and essentially the experience that I'd never ever had before, that sort of stuff, right? But kind of coming to the end of 2 years at this company, I started to realize, well, I live with my English friends, I work in near enough 90% in English, I have the occasional call with a foreign client in a language, so I'm not really living the life of languages that I wanted to, right? It's not really living up to what I wanted to do. And it was at this point that I made a pretty bad decision, whereby, again, I went into this thing of, right, I've got to use my language, And I found this job as a technical consultant. And just to give you some background, I'm not technical at all, and I don't really like learning about technical stuff. And I found this job, it was at HSBC, so a big bank, and it was a technical consultant for international clients, for French, German, and Spanish. And a similar sort of story, I go into the interview, the guy starts telling me about this role, he's like, yeah, so technical stuff, but we can teach you that on the job. However, you're going to be working in a European team with French, German, and Spanish people and speaking to French, German, and Spanish clients. So basically the only thing that went through my head was, ich werde jeden Tag Deutsch sprechen können. Cool. So that was basically about it. And the reason I say that was a bad decision is it was the most boring job I've ever had in my life. Terrible. And it was probably, no reflection on HSBC, just to say for anyone who does work for them, it was the worst job fit in the world. It was a bad decision on my part, right? And so essentially, after about a month, I realized that it was I shouldn't carry on working there. And I started trying to think, okay, so what is it? I'd probably say it's the first time I started making like sensible decisions, like good decisions in terms of this language stuff. So I started thinking, okay, what is it I liked from the first jobs? And what is it that I liked about the language stuff? And I started trying to put it all together and trying to work out, it literally took about a couple of months working this out, what is it that I can do, what would be my perfect job? And I kind of decided for myself, okay, well, if maybe I move abroad, and my whole lifestyle, so I have a group of friends, I have sports, I have all this sort of stuff in other languages, and maybe I could use my languages abroad to sell to like English clients. And eventually I moved to Paris and really made a massive effort. So I joined a French sports team, went to loads and loads of meetups, basically did anything that I could do avoiding kind of internationals, expats and English speaking stuff to really integrate with the French culture. And I also found a job at a company called Augment, so it's quite cool, where I was selling augmented reality, and it was for international clients as well. But I had French colleagues, French clients, Spanish clients, German clients, etc. So basically my whole life was surrounded by languages. So kind of at this point I realized that I kind of got the lifestyle that I wanted, so I'd kind of achieved my goal of a life full of languages, right? So I was pretty happy with that. And then I was very drunk one day, which is how all good stories start, obviously. And I remember I was sitting with my colleague, Caroline, and I said, because I've been going to these meetups and I've been speaking about languages, a lot of language meetups, and I realized that I had more passion speaking about languages than I did talking about augmented reality. I was like, well, that seems a little bit weird if augmented reality is my job and that's what I'm going to do every day, and ultimately I prefer talking about stuff at meetups. So I said to Caroline, I said, j'ai envie de faire quelque chose avec les langues. I want to do something with languages. And she said, bah, on monte une chaîne. Start a YouTube channel. I said, ça marche, okay. And that was our first formal business meeting for the YouTube channel that we launched, which was called La Ferpection, which is basically about making fun language videos on topics that we find interesting. And then that also, through making these videos, I kind of realized that it was really good fun. So I really, really enjoyed making videos, and specifically if they're videos talking about languages, because that's basically what I like, right? Like everyone in this room. And so then I decided, I launched another YouTube channel with Lena Vasquez down here, called Double Deutsch, which is to help you learn German by turning boring concepts into fun videos. So if you want to learn German, subscribe. That's my promotion done. But essentially, so it was probably about I've probably been making videos for about a year or so, and it got to the point where I was thinking, it'd be really awesome if that could be my job, if I could get paid to make videos, and make videos about languages. And the more stuff I did in this language stuff, the more people actually started contacting me and asking me about videos, until the point where I had what I actually do now, is the French government contacted me about a language project called Kioz, which is for French people wanting to learn languages. And the point that I'm basically trying to make is, I don't have all the answers about all this stuff. I don't really know what I'll be doing in 6 months or a year or whatever. I'm not the guru on this stuff. However, what I have managed to do is to create and always push through to have a life full of languages. And so that's kind of the story up until now. And I was trying to think, so kind of how could I summarize this? What are the things that you could take away, and maybe what would I do differently if I was talking to my 22-year-old self? So I think the first thing, who are the people that are about to do a language degree? Put your hands up. That are going to study? Okay. Not to put you off, but essentially I did my language degree purely because I like languages at school and my teacher said you should learn a language. However, what I found is essentially the reason I like languages is being able to speak, watch films, listen to music and all this sort of stuff. And the language degree was very much focused on teaching me like technical stuff, a lot about the history, about the culture, like phonetics a lot of the time. And I actually ended up like skipping class and just like watching films in French and German. And I actually found that very much the language degree was setting me up for what I would class as a pure language career. So by pure language career, I mean a translator. So just for clarification, translating from one language into another by text. Hands up if we have any translators. Okay. Or an interpreter. So interpreter translating via speaking, or a teacher. So just put your hands up if you're a translator, teacher, or an interpreter. And anyone thinking about doing a job like that? Maybe speak. I know I'm not the expert on that, so maybe speak to any of these guys that had their hands up, ask them what they think about it, and a bit of networking, always helps. But anyway, yes, I realised I was terrible at translation, terrible at interpreting, and I realised that probably wasn't the route that I was going to go down. So what I kind of saw was that after university, and if we kind of think about the story that I told, is that at the beginning, very much when I didn't have much experience, is that I was hired for languages. So what I mean by that is that, for example, in Barcelona, as the international relationships executive, there were elements that they wanted me to do with like administration in English and German and French and stuff like that. But it was very much just because I spoke those languages. I didn't have any extra experience or skills. And I must admit, the other job offers that I had were very much based on, how can I put this nicely? They weren't particularly interesting jobs, let me put it that way. It was just purely focused on the language, and I was excited by the language, but they weren't the most exciting jobs in the world, is how I put it. And then slightly later, when I almost took the focus off the language, is I was then hired with languages. So for example, if we think about HSBC or Augment in France, or about the videos, is that I either had sales, technology, or video experience mixed with languages. And that's definitely when I found that if you have some other skill and can mix it with languages, that is absolutely a huge power. And I found that when I went to Paris, for example, I had like 5 job offers that I could choose from. So I found struggling to get a job straight out of uni, just purely because the only thing I could offer was languages. And the minute I had a little bit of experience with something else and languages, then that was exploded. Like I had a lot more opportunities on my plate. and in terms of the language lifestyle, I must admit it's kind of hard because there'll be people in this room. Some of you have a kid in the house. Others of you, maybe like me when I was 20, are able to go to Brazil and just move to some random town. So in terms of having a language lifestyle, that's all very relevant to you and your life, right? But I'd say there are probably three things, kind of three key things I wanted to leave you with, that if I could maybe go back and tell myself when I was younger, almost like the three takeaways from the presentation, right? So particularly when it comes to language learning and language lifestyle and language jobs, is always take the hard option. Always take the hard option. So I think it would have been very easy for me, if I wanted to learn Portuguese, download an app, get a book, take a course. It's pretty hard to go to some random town where you don't know anybody or work in a pizzeria and not understand half of what anyone says. It's also very easy, if you're working in the UK, to go home after a hard day's work, put on an English film and be there on autopilot. It's very hard to go home, watch a Russian series and write down these, like, the words that you don't know and really listen and work on your languages, right? So I'd say that anyone trying to learn a language, anyone looking for a language job and a language lifestyle, always take the hard option. That's what I'd say. Secondly, I think a big takeaway, particularly from my story, a boring job is boring no matter which language you're speaking. And that's true of every single point or mistake that I made. Was I was focused way too much on, I'm going to speak French or Spanish or Portuguese or English or whatever it is, and I really wasn't focused on the actual job that I was going to do, right? And I think it's really important that if you are a language lover, that's absolutely brilliant, but you also want to be thinking about, okay, rather than just applying languages, then, okay, what is it that I like? What type of lifestyle do I want to lead? Like, what are my skills, and how can I firstly maybe think about that, and then apply languages to it? And as I mentioned, then that's going to be a huge boost if you have the mix of those skills and the languages together. Huge boost. And finally, enjoy the mistakes, because as you can see, I made quite a few. But ultimately, I would never have started doing videos or YouTube if I hadn't have moved to Paris and all this sort of stuff and blah. So essentially, it's a massive chain that has ultimately led me up to what I'm currently doing. So enjoy the mistakes along the way and don't worry about too much about getting it right the first time. And hopefully, if you do all of that, you can have a life full of languages. And that was it. Questions? Okay. Can we know how many languages do you speak? You can. So I speak 6, and I use 4 on a daily basis. So it's French, German, Spanish, English, and then Dutch and Portuguese that I speak as well. And I've learned more, but kind of for fun. What did the French government hire you to do? Videos. Language videos. Traveling languages, culture and friends. Traveling languages, culture and friends versus so many people and activities I would miss just too much. Do you have any idea, advice how to choose? So, traveling languages, culture and friends versus so many people and activities I would miss just too much. Do you have any advice how to choose? So can you give me more context to ever ask that question? Okay, I'm not really sure I understand the question.
Is it maybe that they're wondering, because as you're on the road, you're missing out maybe on closer relationships back home? Is that kind of where they're going?
Are you anonymous?
No, I'm not.
All right, fair enough. If that is the question, I'm going to pretend that's the question. How would I say that? I'd actually say that's a very good question, if that is the question being asked. And I'd actually say it's a very hard decision that I had to make, because I'm actually very close to my mum, I'm very close to my family, and I'm very close to my friends that live in London, which is why I didn't, for example, stay in Brazil, and I've never really moved really far away for a long time, and why Paris and Amsterdam or anywhere in Europe kind of feels like a happy medium, because I can easily get home in about an hour, and I manage to visit home probably once every 6 weeks or 2 months. So I kind of understand where you're coming from with that question, and I would just say you've got to weigh it up, but I personally think if you really want to use languages in your everyday life, and that's moving abroad is the best option. As I said, the hard option generally is the best when it comes to languages. That's it.
Any advice on creating a YouTube content strategy?
Okay. Any advice on creating a YouTube content strategy? Yes. So I'd say the first thing before you do anything would be to really work out what your niche is or what you're going to be talking about, and then essentially work out how much competition there is in that market of what you're doing. Because if you try and create a YouTube content strategy about something that's already been done 100 times, unfortunately, very few people are going to see your content. And then secondly, and probably even more importantly, is that whatever you do, don't just try and copy other people. What you want to do is look around, take in as much information as you can from all the different things that you like, and then very much base it on your own personality and your own skills and your own life, right? Because no one wants to hear someone talking about someone else's life or trying to copy someone else's style. You want to have your own style of whatever you're doing. Could you elaborate on your process of making a YouTube video? Sorry. Could you elaborate on your process of making a YouTube video and what programs, tools, cameras do you use? Okay. Yes, I can. Cameras, process, tools, I saw that last question as well. So essentially, the camera I use is a Panasonic Lumix 7. Not that that will mean much to a lot of people. Essentially, the thing about a camera or equipment is you really shouldn't worry too much about whatever equipment you use. You should basically figure out whatever you have and whatever you can afford and make the best out of that. But to answer the question, Panasonic Lumix 7, and my editing software is Premiere Pro. And there we go. And I write all the scripts before I make a video, and voila.
Do you use a lava mic, or is it what's your mic situation?
So I use, so the microphone I use is a shotgun mic, and then I use a boom pole to make it come in closer to my head, like to my face, so that you get a better sound quality. Any more YouTube questions? I feel like I chose the wrong topic. You have worked with augmented reality. Do you think there's potential in augmented or virtual reality language learning teaching? I've actually seen quite a few language learning augmented reality apps, so yes, to answer that question. No? We'll leave. Oh, really? We'll leave that. Well, that's everything. If you have any other separate questions you don't want to ask via the chat, feel free to come and chat, and thank you very much.